Our focus is mostly on delivering music, but visual presentation is important online. Sound and light are actually really similar in a lot of ways, and the two of them have always seemed to enjoy a pretty good relationship. The primary colors are even the 1, 3, and 5 positions in the Roy G. Biv spectrum of visible light, in the same way that those intervals make up a major chord in a scale when applied to sound waves. A lot of the same principles of balance, contrast, and harmony that we use in music are also similar in the visual world, like the complementary colors wheel and the circle of fifths. The way image file compression works, and some of the same guidelines we'll use there, might also remind you of MP3 bit rates. In this video, I'll show you some cut and paste design techniques that you can try with Google image results, stuff on your phone, and software like Photoshop, or the more affordable free GIMP program that we'll be looking at here. These are pretty much the same collage aesthetics we use in our musical productions and DJ mixes already. It makes perfect sense to work them into the visual side of our presentation too. But before we get into some basics of using GIMP, let's go over a few quick fundamentals that'll help you when working with images and graphics in any software. There are 3 main types of image file that you'll come across on the internet, and they all have slightly different uses and merits. JPEG is the best one for general images and probably the one you'll use and see the most. It's optimized for photo quality and has no limit on the number of colors. You can also adjust the amount of compression to have more range and quality and control the file size. These will end up much smaller and more manageable than a photo straight off your digital camera or phone, so you should convert any of those to JPEG and make this your default image format. Hang on to the originals though. You can always make photos smaller without losing quality, but it doesn't work the other way around. GIF files have nice sharp edges and are better for text, but only 256 possible colors. When you see an animated image repeating in a cycle, that's a GIF. They can also have a transparent background, which makes them look good over top of another image or solid color. This format is mostly used for logos and simple animations, but as you can see here, a lot of people have taken it much further and are making ones that are really intricate. PNG format is another one mostly used for small logos, buttons, and icons. The color range is much better than a GIF, but these can't be animated. It also allows for background transparency, and the lossless compression, meaning no reduction in quality, is sharper than a JPEG, but file sizes will be much larger if it's a realistic photo and there are lots of colors. You'll definitely run into them being used in a bunch of different ways, and it's a more modern web format. But right now, PNG files are mostly for smaller, more basic icons, solid colored graphics, logos and buttons, or any images with lots of text and straight edges like a screenshot. Unless it's animated, you should always pick this format over a GIF for those types of elements. On a computer monitor, the standard resolution is 72 ppi, that's pixels per inch. And setting it higher with your software won't improve quality at all unless you're planning to print the image to paper. In that case, you would want to save it closer to 300 ppi. Since it'll probably just be displayed on a screen, the quality percentage value that you choose when saving a JPEG will have much more impact on the look and file size of the image. Always test it visually to make sure it's okay, but the 50 to 70% range is about right for the internet. Photoshop considers 60% to be high quality. You won't notice much difference until you get below 50%. So try to keep your image files as small as you can for fast loading pages and an efficient site. If you haven't downloaded the free GIMP program yet, I highly recommend installing it and giving it a shot if you just have simple photo software and want a free upgrade. You'll only need to scratch the surface and get comfortable with a few of the basic functions to have all the tools you need for building a website or creating podcast artwork. There are lots of tutorials and full documentation on their site if you want to explore and try other features and effects, so we'll just go through the ones you'll really need here. Launching GIMP for the first time, you'll want to expand the window and fill up the whole screen. We can also use the Windows menu at the top to turn off single window mode if you'd rather be able to see your desktop while working, but I'll stick with the default. Opening up the GIMP menu and going into the Preferences will let you pick different themes for the color of the interface if you don't like the dark mode. Maybe you'll also want to change the icon theme to something more colorful. Make sure to click OK if you made any changes. These side panels can also be stretched and adjusted any way that you want. The next time you open GIMP, this layout will be saved just the way you left it, and you'll only have to set it up once. Let's focus on the section in the middle for now. Click the File menu on the far left and select Open, then pick an image from your Bits and Pieces folder. We'll start with something simple and pick one of the background textures that we found. You'll notice at the top of the image window, we can see some information about the file. The far right shows us the size in pixels. If it's from your phone, camera, or something you found online, the photo might be much bigger than we need. At the bottom here, you can see a percentage value that tells us the image we're looking at has been shrunk to fit our screen by that much. You can just click on the arrow and choose a different value if you want to zoom in or out. Try selecting 100% to see the photo in its original size, and keep in mind that 900 to 1000 pixels is about the maximum width of a standard web page. This one is much too big for most of our uses, but iTunes needs your podcast artwork to be 1400 by 1400 pixels, so let's resize to those dimensions. If you right-click over the image, you'll see a list of menu items pop up. These are the same ones that you can see along the top bar, and it's just a faster way to access those commands sometimes. Go to the Image menu and select Scale Image. Now try changing the width value to 1400 and hit Enter. You'll notice that it automatically changed the height value also. That's because the chain here on the side is engaged and the two values are locked together. Most of the time you'll want to keep it that way so the image proportion stays consistent and it doesn't get stretched in a weird way when you change the size. But you're able to click that and enter any value that you need. I'm going to keep it locked and just make sure that both the width and height are at least 1400 pixels. We can trim it down a little more after and do some fine tuning to get the square dimension that we need for your podcast artwork or album cover. Just click the Scale button when you're ready. If your image came from a camera or phone, it might also need to be rotated and oriented the right way. From the Image menu, scroll down and hover over Transform to see your rotation and flipping options. You can always use Ctrl or Command Z to undo any changes you make, or just perform the operation a couple of times in 90-degree increments until you get it right side up. Since we only want to use a 1400 by 1400 pixel section of this larger image, we're going to have to do what's called cropping. That involves just drawing a box around the part that we want and getting rid of anything outside of it. This shape will now become the new frame and dimension of the photo. Let's switch the setting at the bottom here and zoom out so we can see the full image. Over on the left side of your screen, you'll find the Toolbox Tool Options window. If you hover over each icon with your mouse, the name of the tool and a helpful little description pops up. Click the cropping tool here on the third row. Now move your mouse to the top left of the image, just outside the frame. By left-clicking and holding the button down, you can drag your mouse around the image and create a box that matches the dimensions we're looking for. Beside the percentage value at the bottom of your center window, you can see the size of your selection box and pixels changing. So adjust that and move it around until it says 1400 by 1400, then take your finger off the mouse button. Before making the cut, you can also left-click hold while dragging that selected area around the image to pick the best part without altering the dimensions you just created. When you're ready, left-click once or hit Enter and it will get rid of anything outside of the box. So now that you have your first building block, we should save this image in your folder. Let's keep the big original one in there and make this a new JPEG image by heading to the File menu and scrolling down to Export As. Give it a name.jpg, find your folder, and click Export down at the bottom. Since it's a JPEG, you'll have an option for quality and the amount of compression that it's going to use when rendering. If this was our finished image, I'd say 50 to 70%, but think of it in terms of music and sound again for a minute. A finished song will get mixed down to a CD quality WAV file or MP3, but there are lots of benefits to working with higher resolution 24-bit tracks until it gets to that final stage. You'll end up with better results by saving your bits and pieces at 100% for now. Back in your main window, close the file by clicking the X at the top or the Close View option from the File menu and choosing to discard the changes. With a fresh window, you can check that your square saved properly by scrolling down the File menu to Open and then selecting the new file you just created so it appears again. The next thing you might want to do is add some text to your background. In the toolbox on your left, select the letter A and your text options will show up in the Tool Options window. If for some reason you can't see that window, double-click the A text tool again and it will pop back up. This is where you can set the font style, size, and color that you'd like to start with. Move your mouse over the image where you want the text to begin and left-click once. When you type some words, you'll see them appear in the box below and also next to your zoom percentage at the bottom of the window. You can double-click the block of text to select it and play around with these hovering tool options some more to find a font and size that looks good. Click this box to choose a different color for the text from a palette or with numerical values. Let's turn our attention to the Layers Brushes window on the right that we've been ignoring so far. This is the visual equivalent of a multi-track recording console or DJ mixer because you can stack different images on top of each other and then merge them into one final mixdown. When we added our text, GIMP automatically created a new track, which we'll call Layer from now on, and place it on top of our background. This is great news because we can now make changes to either layer without affecting the other. If your text isn't where it should be, you can easily move it around on top of the background. In your toolbox, find the Move tool with the arrows pointing in all directions and select it. Click once on your box of text, it now has a yellow dotted line around it, to choose that layer as the one that you want to move. By holding down your left mouse button, you can drag the text anywhere in the frame and then release the button when it's in the right spot. If your background moved instead, you might have clicked a little too low or had highlighted the background layer in that window by clicking on it. As always, you can use Ctrl or Command Z to undo any mistakes and make sure the right layer is selected for the move. You can also select Move the Active Layer in the tool options if you prefer to just focus on one at a time, which I find a lot easier. To add another line of text, maybe in a different font or size, just select the A again, pick the spot where it will start, and repeat the same process as your first block of words. You'll see it added to the top of the window on your right as a separate layer, and you can then use the Move tool again to position it anywhere. You're probably starting to see how powerful layers can be, and are thinking of some ideas for what's next from your Bits and Pieces folder. You might want to prepare some of those images ahead of time in a separate window using the Open command from the File menu. It's more fun to have them already resized, flipped, and cropped the way you want when you load them in as a new layer. Keep your originals by discarding changes and save the prepared ones with new names. When you're ready to add on top of what you have so far, go to the File menu, but select Open as Layers this time and pick the new image. When it pops up on top, you can then perform any of the standard transform or scale changes, but now from the Layer menu so it doesn't affect anything else in your frame. You'll also be able to fine-tune some more with the Rotate tool and the Scale tool while you shift them around and see how everything looks together. Some other commands like adding a new layer or making a copy can be found down here on the right. To move elements up and down, left-click and drag them to whatever depth you want. Keep stacking images and experimenting with more layers until you have something interesting that you like. When you want to mix down all the layers to one final image, use the same Export As command from the File menu and save it as a JPEG with the appropriate quality setting. If you're finished, try around 60% and open the file to see how it looks. You could even experiment by also saving it at a few different compression settings or as a GIF and PNG just to see how those different file types handle your creation. The Export As command is the mixdown that will render your layers to a single image file that you can use, but we want to make sure that you can also make changes to the master tape easily in the future or work on it in stages over a few sessions. To save your GIMP work file with all of the layer information intact, you need to use the Save As option from the File menu and give it whatever name you want, followed by the .xcf extension that it suggests. Clicking that save file in your folder will now open up GIMP right where you left off on that project. Those are really all the basic image tools you need, but the options in GIMP run pretty deep if you want to explore some of the other features. You can read the full user manual at gimp.org/docs if you want to look up anything specific, but let's just give you a quick demonstration of some other useful tools and fun effects to get more ideas for creating your images. If you'd like to apply some kind of effect to one of your layers, just select and highlight it in the Layers window. From the Filters menu, you can try out the different textures and experiment with generating some strange effects. Use your Ctrl or Command Z to undo anything you don't like, and save different versions whenever you find something that looks great. The first icon in your toolbox works a lot like the cropping tool, but it has a few other uses that might come in handy. Let's mute most of our channels by clicking the eyes next to all the layers, except for the background. Now pick a spot in the top left corner, left-click your mouse, and hold while you drag it around to create a square within your square. Release your mouse button and you'll see a moving dotted line around your selection. You can now apply a filter effect or any change that you'd like from the menus, and it will just affect the selected area. From the Edit menu, you can cut, copy, or paste that box, and also clear it or fill it with any color or pattern. The Select menu will now also give you a few more options. The second icon in your toolbox, the Ellipse Select tool, works exactly the same way as the rectangle, but it allows you to select a circular area instead. To change the fill colors and patterns that'll be used in your selected areas, click the Bucket Fill tool that looks like a paint can. You'll now see the tool options so you can change the pattern or pick the right color for the fill by changing the FG color or the BG color in your toolbox palette. To get rid of the flashing selection box, go back to your rectangle or ellipse tool and click once just outside of the frame. The pencil tool and the paintbrush tool both work the same way and allow you to draw freehand in whatever color is shown in the toolbox by holding down the left mouse button and releasing at the end of a line. You have options for how thick that line will be in your toolbox options by changing the size value. Pick the shape of the brush there also, or you can make that change in the Brushes section too. If you want to draw a perfectly straight line with either of those tools instead of drawing freehand, left-click once on the spot your line will start and make a dot. Now hold down the Shift key and move your mouse to the point where your line will end, then make another left-click dot. The software will connect the dots and draw a line between them in the thickness that you set in the tool option size and the active FG foreground color. When you release the Shift key, your line will end, but if you keep it held down, you can then connect that second point to another one by clicking somewhere else, and so on. Most of the tools in that row of the toolbox will also let you do that to get nice straight lines. Being aware of the ruler at the top and on the left side of the window will help you line things up nicely, and you can also try the alignment tool here to center elements in relation to each other. If you're creating podcast artwork, keep in mind that it'll be shrunk down pretty small when it appears in directory previews and on mobile devices. iTunes is the only place that needs such big dimensions. See how it also looks as a smaller 50 by 50 pixel image with the zoom or scale image command in the image menu. Make sure it still looks great and that you can read all the words when it's used anywhere at that smaller size, because that's how people will see it most of the time. Go with your gut and position elements in any way that looks good to you. There aren't any rules, but a lot has been written on the subject of how to compose eye-catching images and create a better visual flow. It's all based on using familiar geometry, balance, symmetry, and just generally keeping it simple. The rule of thirds and leading lines are good Googles if you'd ever like to dig into visual composition theory a little more. If you've got something that you like for your podcast artwork, album cover, or website design, you're ready to upgrade your membership for access to the rest of this kit. By the end of the next module, you'll have your own website, unlimited file storage, and custom email addresses. We're about to cross an exciting threshold and lay an important foundation for your music. If you still have any questions about whether this training kit is right for your situation, message Brad at podcastingfordjs.com to get some more information.